Welcome to Toastmaster Time, the show that's got everybody talking. My name is James Jeffley, and I'm excited to be the host for this special edition of Toastmaster Time TV. Tonight is the contest edition. Every year in Toastmasters, we hold a series of contests to help our speakers take their skills to a new level. And tonight, to tell us all about that, is our very own Chief Judge, Mr. Knox. Lewis, tell us about the show.
Thank you, James. Tonight, as the Chief Judge, I will be looking at three aspects of these speeches: content, delivery, and language. Now, each of these areas will be judged at a different level. Content should be judged with 50%, delivery at 30%, and lastly, language at 20%. Now, under content, I'll be looking at the development of the speech, the importance of the speech, the value of the speech, and how it was presented. Under delivery, I'll be looking at the manner, the voice, and the use of space. And finally, with language, we'll be looking at the appropriateness of the language for this speech and whether or not correct English was used. These three areas, content, delivery, and language, will be the factors that we'll be looking at tonight. I look forward to three great speeches, and I know you do too. Back to you, James.
Thank you so much, Lewis. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker on tonight's special edition of Toastmaster Time, Mr. Brendan James Murphy. Brendan, welcome back to Toastmaster Time TV.
Thank you, James. Good to be here again.
What club are you a member of?
Tales and Tellers Toastmasters.
And they're located in?
Concord at the Concord Denny's.
In Concord at the Denny's. Now, how long have you been a Toastmaster?
21 years.
21 years. And this is not your first contest, right?
It is not.
Wonderful. What do you get out of participating in the contests?
In Toastmasters, often we give new speeches every time. In a contest, you get to work on the same speech again and again. And that craft of honing your message through choosing just the right phrase or the gesture at the right time is very helpful.
Well, I've heard you speak. You're a wonderful speaker, and I look forward to hearing this speech. Are you
Thank
ready?
you, I'm ready.
Give you a moment to get set up, and I'll tell our audience a little bit more about Toastmasters contests. When we have a contest, generally the contestants compete at their club level, and if they win, they advance on to their area, their division, and then their district level. And at each level, the competition is fierce. Right now, I want to introduce our first competitor, Brendan James Murphy, Force. Force, Brendan James Murphy.
Attitude isn't everything, but sometimes it's the only thing. A long time ago, when I was a teenager, I learned this lesson from old Ben after 10 treacherous days of fighting forest fires in the foothills of Nevada. Ben was ancient, 39. A fearless firefighter, yet when we started the drive home to California, his heart was filled with dread. He complained that he faced a fate far, far worse than fire. His two young sons made him watch the original Star Wars movie over and over and over. The worst part was they would quote the film to him again and again and again. Doing the dishes. May the Force be with you, Father. Going to the bathroom. May the Force be with you, Father. Kissing his wife. The Force is strong with this one. Ben's complaints were interrupted by the smell of smoke, the smoke of another fire. Old Ben became rejuvenated Ben and turned the truck toward the blaze. The late afternoon thermometer read 103 degrees. The fire was moving up a steep slope. Frick yeah! Actually, Ben didn't use the word frick. However, his enthusiasm was the spark plug that restarted our engines. Our small crew found a way to stop that blaze in only 8 hours using axes and shovels and the force of a frick yeah. As we lay exhausted and dehydrated, Ben radioed the command center to find out when the relief crew would arrive to finish extinguishing the fire. There would be no relief, just a command to mop up. Mop up requires the poor firefighter to crawl through the burnt out fire zone, feeling barehanded for hot spots, and then mixing them with dirt. This resulted in eyes, ears, nose, and mouth caked in ash, dirt, and smoke. We hated mop-up. But here's the thing. We needed to extinguish all those hot spots before the morning winds could come and grab some embers and blow them over the hill where our neighborhood lay unprotected. After 10 exhausting days on one fire and then having to handle this fire without help or supply, we had no hope of saving those homes. Ben called us a bunch of worthless shots. And no, he didn't use the word shots. He tried other forms of motivational speaking. Nothing worked until a twisted miracle occurred. Ben stepped in a hole and tripped. He yelled out, "Son of a biscuit!" We knew something was terribly wrong because he actually used the word biscuit. We ran over to see Ben covered in ash and dirt. Upset and making a fool of himself, he uttered the first phrase that came to his mind, "Curse my metal body." We laughed because Ben had quoted his least favorite film, Star Wars. Our laughter transformed old Ben into Obi-Wan Kenobi, holding his shovel like a lightsaber. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. And he continued reciting the film word for word. His act of storytelling gave us a positive attitude and made work fun. We loved mop-up. With an hour before sunrise, Luke and Leia were escaping the evil Empire's Death Star while we were laughing, chopping, and shoveling through the dust. Ben quoted Han Solo's warning, "Don't get cocky," so we doubled our efforts. As the evil Empire's Death Star exploded, our tiny band of Jedis had obliterated every hotspot on that mountain through the force of our improbable transformation. An affirmative attitude is a formidable force. But here's the thing. You need to choose it again and again and again. I know, because along with my connection to old Ben, I had let the wisdom of that night slip away until 20 years later, when I spoke to Ben's sons at Ben's funeral. I told them that I was sorry that Ben and I had lost contact throughout the years, but I was grateful for the chance to recall his Star Wars reenactment. His son smiled because Ben had told them the story of that night over and over and over. When his boys would roll their eyes, he would forcefully remind them that attitude isn't everything, but sometimes it's the only thing. Fellow Toastmasters and welcome guests, in honor of old Ben, I encourage you to use a positive attitude every day, so that force may be with you always. Mr. Toastmaster.
That was a wonderful speech. One of the things that speaking in a contest allows you to do is take your writing to another level, your body language and vocal skills to another level. And to help demonstrate what another level looks like, I'd like to welcome our second speaker to the show, Aurora Bataclan. Aurora, welcome to Toastmaster Time.
Thank you.
Is this your first time on the show?
It sure is.
And how long have you been in Toastmasters?
A long time. I'd say about 18 years.
Wow, 18 years. And what club are you a member of?
San Leandro Toastmasters.
San Leandro Toastmasters. And is this your first contest?
It sure is.
So what's the biggest lesson you've learned so far in the Toastmaster speaking contests?
Well, I learned that if you visualize something, you use that to push through your fear. So
Important.
visualize a good outcome.
An important lesson, not just for speaking, but life.
Yes.
You ready to give your speech?
I sure am.
I'll give you a moment to set up, and I'll talk to our audience a little bit more.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Aurora. Toastmasters gives you the chance to overcome your fear of public speaking, and you can do that in any one of about 16,000 clubs worldwide. It also gives you a chance to work on your leadership skills. But if you want to take those speaking skills to the next level, I strongly encourage you to participate in a contest. I'd like to welcome our second speaker to the speaking platform, Aurora Bataclan, Adventures in Mountain Climbing. Adventures in Mountain Climbing, Aurora Bataclan.
Raise your hand if you've climbed Mount Everest. Nobody? Well, you know what? Neither have I. In fact, I've never even been to the Himalayas. But I have conquered my own Mount Everest. Fellow Toastmasters, when I was 18, I was overcome by anxiety and panic, and my life changed drastically. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, I went from being carefree and outgoing to being anxious all the time. I was so anxious that my resting heart rate was 120 beats per minute. That's almost double the normal average. My panic attacks were triggered by social situations. So when I was with people, that heart rate would jump up to 140, maybe even 150 beats per minute. But add to that dizziness, shortness of breath, and an impending sense of doom. Imagine feeling all of this while talking to the person next to you. Do you think you could sustain a conversation? I couldn't. I was terrified and ashamed, and I stayed away from social situations. But to my dismay, I discovered that this only made me more afraid. And it became apparent that to have any semblance of a normal life, I would need to do the hard thing, confront my anxiety, and put myself in the situations I dreaded. You see, I was living on a plateau, and it was time for me to move, time to face my demons, time to climb my Mount Everest. My first stop on the mountain was a place of learning. I read everything I could get my hands on to understand my anxiety. I borrowed so many books from the library. My late fees were their main source of revenue. I learned that 18% of Americans are afflicted with some form of anxiety disorder. I learned that my own anxiety was a confluence of a genetic predisposition and stressful life experiences. I learned I wasn't crazy. I wasn't defective. And my anxiety, it wasn't my fault. The sun was shining on the summit of my behemoth of a mountain, and I felt the pull of a better life. So I decided to climb higher. My second stop on the mountain is a place I stayed at for a long time. This is where I made myself do all those things I dreaded. And I bet you'll never guess the words I dreaded hearing the most. Hey, Aurora, do you want to go out to lunch? And I think to myself, oh no. Oh, this means I need to sit down, talk to people, look them in the eye while eating. I'll do it, but I really don't want to because I'm going to panic and they'll see it and they'll judge me and they won't accept me and then I'll be alone. But I was already alone. My anxiety had built a wall between me and the rest of the world. And no matter how badly I wanted to connect with people and get close to them. I just couldn't. I was in a constant state of fight or flight. And then one day, I met my husband on a blind lunch date that almost never happened. I walked into El Torito and was greeted by the tallest glass of water. Where other people saw my anxiety, Ramon saw me. He loved me when my anxiety was out of control and I felt like nothing but a shadow of myself. He climbed that mountain with me, and I knew I wasn't alone. I arrived at my third stop without realizing it. You see, I became a mother. I cradled my child in my arms, and when she cried, "Mama," I said, "Mama's got you, baby. I love you, Cammy girl." I didn't want her to tread the same ground I did. The life I envisioned for her was leaps and bounds beyond my own. But then I realized that the way I lived my life would pave the way for hers. And I knew in that instant that I had to become more than I was. I had to become the best version of myself that I could possibly be. For Cammy, for Ramon, for me. Oh, I really upped the ante at this point. My coping skills had made anxiety tolerable, but that was no longer good enough because now I was looking to thrive. And so I did the unthinkable. I accepted my anxiety and allowed it to exist, and this one shift changed everything. I continued to do the scary things, and over time, anxiety receded to the background. Still there, but no longer the star of the show. And this is how I regained control of my life. If there's anything I've learned on this journey, it's that we can't always choose our circumstances. But we always choose who we become because of them. We are greater than any hardship that can befall us. So when your hardship tries to push you into a box, do not yield. Galvanize your resolve and fight for your vision. Your best life and your best self, they are waiting for you. But to get to them, you must summon all your courage and climb your Mount Everest. Mr. Toastmaster.
Wow, that was great. Makes me want to climb a mountain. You know, there are times when you hear motivating speeches, informational speeches, speeches that make you want to get up and do something, take action in your life. And that's one of the great things that you experience in Toastmaster speech contests. Right now, I'd like to introduce our third speaker to tonight's show, Mr. Greg Carter. Greg, welcome to Toastmaster Time.
Thank you, James. Great to be here.
Is this your first time on the show?
It is indeed.
And how long have you been a member of Toastmasters?
6 years next week.
Okay, 6 years. And what club are you a member of?
Santa Rosa.
Santa Rosa. Wow, you came a little ways to come down here.
A little bit. Yeah.
And is this your first contest experience?
Yes, it is.
So what have you gotten out of competing?
I think the main thing I've gotten out of competing is that I've stretched my presupposed limits, and I've discovered abilities in both writing and delivering a speech that I had no idea that I had. Partly, as Brendan said, by doing the same thing over and over and honing it rather than coming up with a different speech each time.
Right. Wonderful. You ready to give your speech?
I am.
Looking forward to hearing it. I'll give you a moment to prepare. You get to discover things about yourself that maybe you weren't aware existed before, and that's one of the great things about working on a speech and mining that speech over and over again for the gems inside. I'd like to welcome our third speaker, Greg Carter. My three friends, Greg Carter.
Allow me to introduce my three friends. The Marlboro Man. Big hat, bigger horse, hacking up a lung as he rides off into the sunset. A little formal, but a real sweet guy, Mr. Goodbar. And speaking of bars, you are a friend of mine, Jose Cuervo. Now, you may have met one or more of my friends before, but let me tell you, we were tight. They hung out at my place 7 nights a week. You see, I counted on my 3 friends to help me with a lifelong case of deep and often suicidal depression. My friends turned out not to be friends at all. They had started out as a short-term solution to my problem and had become a long-term problem in their own right. In 2004, I quit smoking for the 487th time, but this time for good. Later that same year, after one too many lost weekends, I said adios to Jose as well. Of course, this meant I had to double down on Mr. Goodbar. I had him bring over some of his friends. "Hey, Greg," he said, "meet Mr. Good Burrito." And Mr. Good, God, that's a lot of ice cream. I ballooned to almost 300 pounds. Picture me as I am now, only pregnant, with 9-year-old twins. But I got lucky. I got a disease of the colon called diverticulitis. Doc said, "Greg, if this doesn't clear up, we're going to cut open your side, take out a chunk of your large intestine, and hang a plastic bag there to catch the waste products of digestion." I went in for a CAT scan. Had me lie on a cold, hard metal slab, shoved me into a darkened tube, and told me to lie very still. I had spent much of my life thinking I wanted to die, but as I laid there, doing my best cadaver impression, thinking of my wife and 3 young kids at home, contemplating eating myself to death and dying with a bag of poop hanging out of my side, I began to have second thoughts. In fact, I went home determined to change, but I had a lot to learn. I went to the health food store. There was an entire shelf of agave syrup. Jose spoke up. "Hey, Greg, I am made of agave syrup. You see, tequila is a health food." No gracias, Jose. And I persevered. I discovered that cauliflower is not just albino broccoli. And Brussels sprouts aren't just tragically premature little cabbages. I learned to make green smoothies, and that if you put a handful of fresh red strawberries in a green smoothie, you get a brown smoothie. Do you know what a brown smoothie looks like? Well, a chocolate shake. What were you thinking? And I persevered. I began to use the elliptical machine at the gym, then to walk, and eventually to run. The Marlboro man spoke up. "Hey, Greg, if you just like being out of breath, let me introduce you to my friends, emphysema and lung cancer." "No thanks, Marlboro man." And I persevered. As my physical health improved, I began to turn my attention to my mental health. I learned that I could control my thoughts, and in so doing, manage my emotional states. Slowly, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, I began to climb out of the pit of depression in which I had spent so much of my life. I had been on a downward spiral of sickness and misery, and a short, unhappy life appeared to be my fate. Now I found myself riding an exhilarating upward spiral of health and vitality, and a long, healthy, happy life became my destiny. Less than a year after my diagnosis, 125 pounds lighter, I completed the 26.2-mile Humboldt Redwoods Marathon. Fortunately, the diverticulitis had cleared up, so I wasn't forced to run the whole way with a colostomy bag flapping at my side. I used to sit down to mountains of nachos. Now I climb real mountains, Mount Whitney, Mount Fuji, Half Dome. I used to eat food from industrial plants. Now I eat real plants, having transitioned to a whole food vegan diet. Did this mean that my long journey was over? Nothing is ever over. The black dog of depression still howls outside my door from time to time. But with vigilance and perseverance, I've learned to keep him outside where he belongs. So why am I telling you all of this? Is it to show you how remarkable I am? Hardly. Rather, I'm here with a message of profound hope. Because if I can lose almost half my body weight, keep it off for 13 years, and become an endurance athlete, then perhaps you too can realize your health goals. If I can say goodbye to the Marlboro Man, Mr. Goodbar, and Jose Cuervo, then maybe you too can conquer your addictions. And if I can recover from a lifelong case of chronic clinical depression, then perhaps you too can live a life of joy. I invite you to live your life passionately and embrace all that life has to offer. Just be careful who you call your friends.
Wow, another powerful speech.
Amazing, amazing speech. What a cautionary tale when my three friends are really not my three friends.
Yeah, everybody you're on good terms with or is friendly to you is not your real friend.
Absolutely.
Right? That
Absolutely.
was a great personal story. And I think we heard personal stories from all of the speakers tonight.
Yes.
Right?
Amazing stories. You know, whether we were climbing our own personal Mount Everest
Right.
or having the force be with us, each of these speeches had great content, great delivery, and great language. And they all left us a message of hope, things that we can do to our lives on a daily basis to make it better.
And by talking about those personal stories, giving those messages of hope, it allows the speaker to connect with the audience.
Yes.
Because everybody out there in the audience is going through their own personal battles.
Yes.
And by being that open and courageous and vulnerable and sharing your own story, that allows someone in the audience to go, yeah, you know, if they can overcome,
That's right.
maybe I can do it too.
Absolutely. And I think the vulnerability and the authenticity lets each of us know that we can do the same thing. Having these three folks give these tremendous speeches about being authentic and being vulnerable lets another person say, if they can get up and do that, so can I.
Lewis, it's been a pleasure having you as Chief Judge on the show.
Thank you so much for
Right now,
having me.
thank you. It's time to say goodbye. Toastmaster Time TV is a production of District 57 Toastmasters in Northern California. We come to you once a month. And if you want to learn more about District 57, go to d57tm.org. If you'd like to learn more about Toastmaster Time TV, go to toastmastertime.com. And to learn more about Toastmasters, or perhaps even join a club in your area, visit us on the web at www.toastmasters.org. On behalf of all the great staff and crew and volunteers here at the Media Center in Palo Alto, our three speakers, Greg Carter, Aurora Bataclan, and Brendan James Murphy, and our Chief Judge, Lewis Knox, I'm James Jeffley saying, keep on speaking.